YouTube, it's Chris. Welcome back to the channel. In this video, I want to help you get the highest frames and lowest latency out of PUBG with your PC. Now, I've avoided esports titles up until now because generally speaking, older games will run really well, especially if you have newer hardware. Although a lot of you guys have been requesting games like this, so I'm going to start doing games like this now. And if anything, it might not actually help you if you already go into the game and put everything on low. But at least will give you guys some peace of mind that I've tested a whole bunch of things and debunked a whole bunch of different optimizations for the certain game. So hopefully it can help some of you guys out. For some of you, it may not. On default settings, the game mostly put me on ultra settings, a couple of settings on medium and high. Benchmarks are tested with these specs. Do not expect identical results on your hardware. That said, you can expect similar scaling with my recommendations. On default 4K, we've gone from 480 FPS with the optimized setting of 880 FPS with a nice FPS 1% low increase. Now this game engine gets really weird when you start getting above 1000 FPS. So yes, I did see scaling in 1440p and 1080p, but I won't show those here as there is a 0.1% issue with this game. Once you go over 1000 FPS, the 1% lows go really bad. So I'll show that later on. Disable intros, you can go into the PUBG options of Steam and add the launch option no splash, and the other video intros, just go to your PUBG TSL content movies folder and rename these files here. Right, I've made a config on GitHub. This is automated. If you guys are interested, apply the config. I want you guys to go to the start menu, type in script, click on this, scroll down and turn this on so you can run PowerShell scripts. I also want you to go back to your start menu and type in PowerShell. Right click and run as administrator. Make sure it says administrator Windows PowerShell. Let's leave this window here. I want you to go to Google. Google Freethy GitHub should be the first thing that comes up. You need to go to GitHub game configs. Scroll down, you should see the IWR. We're going to click on this to copy the code. We can close that now. Now we can right click to paste or Control V to paste. It'll copy that code there and then you go ahead and press enter. Should have a nice little menu here. I want you to click number 7. For PUBG Battlegrounds, press enter. If you've just downloaded the game and haven't launched it yet, launch the game first, then close the game just to create the config location and press enter. That'll apply the config and the game settings. And then there's just a little bit of intro that we've already talked about, removing no intro for people that don't actually watch the video. Press any key here, we can close this window out or we can press 1 and then enter to exit. Now, I'm quite disappointed in these game developers not including reflex in the game at all. And that's, you may have noticed that I haven't included latency tests in this game. I could technically get out my external latency tool and use muzzle flash, but it's not very reliable. So I've left out latency tests in this video. But what really frustrates me is if you go into the config, you can actually see a DLSS line and even a dynamic render resolution line. But there are no settings for that in the game at all, which is quite frustrating. So NVIDIA make it really easy for game developers to implement reflex in their game. These game developers just seem lazy and haven't done it. And that goes the same for DLSS and all the other things as well. Now we're in the game, go to settings, the config should be applied for you. I would recommend playing in full screen, but if you are on Windows 11, you can play borderless fine on DirectX 11 if you really like. Don't do that on 10. Do not play DirectX 11 games in borderless or windowed mode at all. Okay, so just full screen if you're really not sure, just to be safe, you're in the right flip model. Select your correct resolution. All the settings should be done for you. I've basically left everything very low. If you've got a good card, you can turn some settings up, obviously, and I've turned sharpening on. Benchmarked a bunch of other things, and I'll show you guys later on in the video, but DirectX 11 Enhanced is best. If you are on an AMD card, you want to be using DirectX 12. But if you're on an NVIDIA card, stay on DirectX 11 Enhanced, which is the default setting for the game. A couple other things disabled like replay, network debug, GPU crash debug, some other stuff here and there. I doubt it actually is going to help or do anything, but I've done it anyway. Now, let's say you've already gone and turned your game settings down low. It probably won't be any different. Or if you just want to get into this game, you've tried the config. If you still feel like your CPU can spit out more frames and you're completely GPU bound, you're either on a mid card with a really high resolution or you're on a lower end card and you're just completely struggling. Unfortunately, like I said before about the whole DLSS and the dynamic render resolution thing, it's not really available. So your only really option would be to drag down the render scale, which I wouldn't recommend because it would actually look a lot worse. The only really option at that point is just going a lower resolution. Now, if this config doesn't help you or going very low doesn't boost your frames at all, more than likely you're running into a CPU bottleneck situation. You need to upgrade your CPU. One thing I want you guys to pay attention to, even more so for the fact that the game doesn't have reflex built into it, pay attention to your GPU usage while you're playing. If you go over 90% GPU usage, I'd really highly recommend you capping your FPS, or at least cap it to something that's not going to go over 90% GPU usage, because you will introduce a lot of input lag if you do go over that 90 mark, the 90% of your GPU usage. So use some kind of an overlay like River Tuner or something like that, and just checking your general gameplay. This is going to mainly apply to low end to mid-end card users. It might actually be worth capping also because of the high FPS 1% low bug that I'm going to talk about soon, but we'll talk about that later. Tested the different DirectX models. We have DirectX 11 Enhanced, which is default, which is best. You've also got DirectX 11. So I'm not sure what this is. This might be DirectX 11, and then the top one might by default might be DirectX 11.1 or 11.2. I'm not entirely sure, but the default version is best. And in DirectX 12, that's our result there. So the DirectX 11 Enhanced is best, although this may be different on an AMD card because AMD cards tend to do really well in DirectX 12 and not always as well in DirectX 11. I won't bore you guys with too many benchmark graphs. I'll talk about the things that I've tested, but I wanted to at least show rebar. Rebar was on by default. If you've got it down in BIOS, it's on by default in NVIDIA Inspector. It didn't really help that much, but it doesn't do any harm. So just leave it on. Leave it on in your BIOS, and you don't need to enforce it in an inspector. It's on by default. Now let's talk about this high FPS bug, which is really bothering me, and it was really bothering me today because I've spent all day benchmarking different things with this game, trying to find out what is going on. And you know, just little bits and pieces we'll talk about soon. It seems like when you get over a certain amount of FPS, it really tanks your 0.1 and 1% lows. Now here is 1440p, just to show you guys that it gets tanked. But I also, so as you can see, so 1440p default settings, right? As you can see, we're only getting like 820 here, so it seems to be fine. When I use the optimized settings, because we're getting over a certain amount of FPS, it actually really harms the 1% lows. And this gets even worse on 1080p. And I did include DirectX 12 here just to show you that issue actually doesn't happen because we weren't hitting the FPS. So look, the point of me showing you this is that it seems like there is a high FPS bug in this game, and you might not want to be running ridiculous amount of frames in this game. It may do harm. Now, obviously in a real match, you're probably not going to be getting over 1000 FPS anyway, because this is a game optimization guide. I need to go pick somewhere where it's relatively GPU heavy, because I can't affect what your CPU is doing at all. You know, and all the players are going to be around you at the time of a gunfight, but we need to just get the GPU usage down in the highest frames as possible. So I need to test somewhere where it's consistent. Now, here's a great example. So 1080p, look at what happens with the 1% lows. Now I did tests after tests after tests after tests, and this just kept happening. So it seems like over about 1000 or so, like the 1% lows really get harmed no matter what you do. So I decided to cap in-game. The in-game would only let me cap to 300. Look, they're completely fixed. They're not low like that. And then I thought, hey, well, what if I wanted to cap something higher? So my general rule of thumb of recommendation is use always in-game cap first. If that doesn't work, use NVIDIA driver. If that doesn't work, use something like River Tuner's reflex option. And as you can see here, I thought, hey, let's just cap with River Tuner's reflex option at 800 and see if the 1% lows still get harmed in it, and they don't. So the sweet spot seems to be like under 1000 FPS. I just thought I'd mention that, even for the future, if any of you guys, you know, have a insane rig in 10 years and you're still playing PUBG, with the way this engine works is it seems to really screw things up over a certain amount of FPS. And after seeing all this, it makes me realize that some people might actually prefer DirectX 12 for that exact reason, because the 1% lows are just going to be smoother, even though the frame rate is going to be lower. So ideally, you want to use DirectX 11 Enhanced with some kind of an FPS cap if you're getting a ridiculous amount of frames. Let's talk about all the things I tested and felt like I wasted my time today testing everything. But at least they'll give you a bunch of you guys peace of mind. Now the problem is that there's a lot of documentation online on doing different things for this game because the game's been out for a long time. It looks like the developers are locking out of you being able to do a lot of things, which is interesting. So SM4 used to be a launch command. You could force DirectX 10. That is not working anymore. So that was no dice, no go. Scalability, INI or engine INI or input INI, adding extra lines. That was no dice. I tried something by VIP Map Tep, and I also tried my own. I went to the reference for the Unreal Engine, documentation, added a bunch of stuff. The game just deletes it. It doesn't accept it, even if you try read only. So that was a no dice. Is available, all available cores. The game is already doing that. It made no difference. Matte anti-alias did nothing. The game, you can already disable anti-aliasing by turning it very low in the game. Memory allocation system made no difference. The game's still allocating memory. I tried high priority. The game is in default normal priority. High priority made no difference, did not help whatsoever. Tried affinities for the game, disabling all the threads for the game. That actually made things worse. So I do not recommend doing that. The game is actually using multi-threaded stuff fine. And I even tried disabling CPU 0 and CPU 1, which is core 1 and thread 1. That didn't help either. I tested everything I could, did my best. Long story short, if you're on an AMD card, probably use DirectX 12. If you're on an NVIDIA card, use DirectX 11 Enhanced. Cap your FPS. Ideally in-game. After that, NVIDIA driver. After that, if that doesn't, you don't have any luck with that, try the River Tuner Reflex option. Don't go over 90% GPU usage. And if you're getting a ridiculous amount of frames in game, like over 1,000 or something like that, you might want to cap to something around 800 or just something that you can consistently get. I've found, at least testing things with Unreal Engine 4, once you get past that 400 FPS mark, input lag doesn't really come down that much. It's very, very minimal. So don't feel bad if you feel like you need to cap to something fairly stable. It'll be fine. Benchmarking this game was a bit of a mess today. It was a bit of a pain, but it's done. Hope you guys found the video helpful. See you guys in the next one.
Optimizing game settings in config files can only do so much. Please consider going through this video and GitHub guide to cover the basic Windows and BIOS optimizations. If hardware is limiting your performance, please check out my build guide for upgrades and PC build suggestions. Make sure to update the latest graphics drivers, or at least the recommended version from the game developer or game mentioned in driver patch notes from the driver developer. The NVIDIA app with certain settings turned on will cause frame rate loss. Turn off optimized games and creative applications. Turn off automatically optimized newly added games and apps. Avoid using game filters and statistics. As far as AMD drivers, I've not seen any tests. Be cautious. Game launchers should have logging, game overlay, hardware acceleration, and cloud sync turned off. Please do this for web browsers, Spotify, Discord, or anything else open while you play your games. Any monitoring or RGB program causes frame rate loss even closed. This includes Asus Armory Crate, MSI, Gigabyte, ASRock driver utilities, NZXT Cam, Corsair IQ, Lee L Connect, and etc. Uninstall if possible. Services and drivers for these apps still run even if the apps are closed. GPU-Z, hardware info, MSI Afterburner, and etc. can cause frame rate problems when logging GPU power. Close these out when gaming or turn off GPU power logging. If you'd like your BIOS, game, PC, Windows fresh, tuned, and optimized, check out my PC service. All links can be found in the description below. Just check Linktree.